Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. Toppled Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro pleads not guilty to narcotics charges in a Manhattan federal court. He declares his innocence and says he is still president before the judge cuts him off. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado says she has not spoken to President Donald Trump since October of last year. In a Fox News interview, she says she plans to return to Venezuela as she continues to be seen as a key alternative to Maduro. Israel's foreign minister arrives in Somaliland in the highest profile visit since Israel recognized the breakaway region. He is received by senior officials in Hargeisa and holds meetings with the Somaliland leadership. Ukraine's allies gather in Paris to finalize security guarantees to reassure Kyiv in the event of a ceasefire with Russia. President Zelensky joins more than 27 leaders and senior US negotiators as they work on a joint position for future talks. Activists say at least 35 people are killed and over 1,200 detained as protests continue across Iran with no sign of stopping. Reports say unrest has spread nationwide as authorities and security forces also report injuries amid rising tensions. China says it is strengthening controls on dual-use exports to Japan as tensions rise between the two countries. The Commerce Ministry says the new restrictions take effect immediately. Israel launches artillery and helicopter attacks in southern Gaza, with officials saying a tent of displaced people is hit and 2 family members killed. Gaza health authorities say the death toll since the US broke a truce began has now risen to 422. English manager Liam Rosenoir says he has verbally agreed to become Chelsea FC's next manager. Speaking to the press, Rosenoir said it is an opportunity he can't turn down. Now we start with our coverage, of course, on the ongoing Venezuela crisis, and the United Nations has expressed deep concern over the United States' dramatic operation in Venezuela, warning that it risks violating core principles of international law. Speaking in Geneva, the UN Human Rights Office has said that the action undermines the fundamental rule that countries must respect the sovereignty and political independence of other states. The UN emphasized that the use or threat of force across borders sets a dangerous precedent and could further destabilize an already volatile region. Joining us now to discuss this is Keith Vaz, a former British minister. He joins us live from Dubai to discuss this development. Thank you very much, Keith. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Of course, we were listening to it last night, condemnation from all angles coming from the international community, especially Venezuela's traditional allies at the United Nations Security Council, from the likes of Russia, China and others. How do you think this is going to develop? Is there any course of action that will be proceeded with now? Is this really testing the credibility of the United Nations here?
Good afternoon, Thomas from Dubai. Apologies for joining you in the back of a car rather than the back of a lorry or in a room. But as it was urgent, I have agreed to be on your program. It is urgent what's happening in the world. It is shocking what is happening in the world. It is not unusual for the UN to be able to come out and make these statements. They're guarded statements. They're not outright condemnation, as we've seen from many other countries. To me, this is going to go in 2 ways. First of all, we now have a new president of Venezuela. even though the old president is being held captive in the United States. And a lot depends on how the new Trump mission, is she going to be smart and basically say, please leave, we've got this, or is she going to continue the policies of the previous administration? She's the vice president to Maduro, so therefore she changes she shows the same politics that he does. So getting rid of one and doing business with the other doesn't really make sense, in my view. But nevertheless, she is the democratically elected vice president. It's difficult to understand some of the arguments being put forward here. If it's the Americans' view that the election was rigged, but they're happy to accept the vice president who was elected at the same rigged election, doesn't really make sense. But I think the fact that so many countries have expressed alarm at what is happening will remind the United States they just can't do this. The second big area is going to be China. What is China going to do about this? We've heard they've given a deadline to get this matter resolved. Let us see whether the deadline is met. After all, they control America in a different way. They have the largest amount of US debt. They don't have troops on the ground. What they do have is monetary power. Are they going to use it? And the third area, I suppose, is American public opinion. We've got elections coming up at the end of this year. The Democrats are presumably cock a hoop about this because Maduro is not someone they like particularly, but Trump has said before he became president, no more foreign wars. This is exactly what's happening in Venezuela. And on the hit list is Cuba, Mexico, Greenland, countries that one wouldn't imagine. What is going on here? Have we ever come across a period in our history where so much is going on? Someone needs to sit down and have a good chat with Donald Trump and ask him what he wants to do. I mean, he's been very clear on Venezuela. He wants the oil. He thinks the oil has been stolen. He thinks he's the new James Monroe, former president of the United States. The Monroe Doctrine was really very much like the domino principle, where you just annex as many countries as you can to the country that you control. Keith, Americans are not going to be able to control Venezuela. It's going to be, in my view, a disaster for them.
Keith, I want to go back to something that you just spoke about. Of course, Donald Trump is seemingly intoxicated by the success of the operation on Air Force One, riled off a few countries there, some of which you mentioned, Colombia, Cuba, Iran was spoken about also. How do you think countries are going to be taking this information from Donald Trump? Because we know Donald Trump makes a lot of statements, but now we've seen the action in Venezuela. Do you think countries are going to be taking those words a lot more seriously?
I'm sure they are. What's interesting is what Canada does and Mexico, because they're the two countries that are nearest to the United States. And they're being very cautious about what they're saying. He didn't ring up and talk to NATO allies before he did this, because he feared that it would be leaked. He didn't ring up and talk to the Gang of Eight in Congress because he feared it would be leaked. He wanted a picture like the picture Obama and Hillary Clinton had when they did their operation in Pakistan and they managed to get Osama bin Laden. But Maduro is not Osama bin Laden. You can't on the one hand say you want to stop this narco-terrorism going on, and on the other hand say you want all their oil. It's very confusing. There is nobody who can enter a dialogue with him about this, and nobody seems to be able to stop him. But this is what the American people voted for.
Indeed.
So therefore they're tied with the consequences.
Keith, do stay with us as we're moving on to some further updates. And hundreds of protesters took to the streets of Jakarta, rallying outside the US Embassy to condemn Washington's military operation in Venezuela that led to the capture of President Nicolás Maduro. The demonstration was led by student and labor groups, with protesters holding banners denouncing US policies, chanting anti-US slogans and burning posters of Donald Trump. The protest follows a pre-dawn US operation in Caracas over the weekend, where Maduro was detained and transferred to the United States. Let's listen in to some protesters in Jakarta.
Kami ingin mengecam tindakan yang dilakukan oleh Amerika tanggal 3 lalu, melakukan serangan dan kemudian melakukan penculikan terhadap Presiden Venezuela. Yang itu menurut kami adalah tindakan tidak hanya fasis terhadap rakyat di Venezuela, tetapi juga menginjak-injak dan menghina hukum internasional.
Ini tidak semata-mata sekedar bersolidaritas, gitu ya. Tapi apa yang dilakukan oleh Amerika Serikat adalah bentuk itu tidak menghormati dan mengangkangi kedaulatan satu negara, di mana itu sangat mungkin akan terjadi atau dialami juga oleh Indonesia. Gitu. Jadi kita melakukan aksi hari ini itu selain mengecam Donald Trump, Presiden Amerika Serikat, juga untuk jadi pengingat gitu ya, bahwa kita pun tidak mau Amerika atau negara manapun itu mencampuri ya urusan politik dalam negara.
Next we turn to Europe, and Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said that Denmark can count on European solidarity over Greenland, while warning that NATO members should not attack or even threaten each other. Speaking ahead of a trip to Paris for the Coalition of the Willing meeting on Ukraine, Tusk addressed recent comments by US President Donald Trump about wanting to take over the Arctic island. He added that European solidarity and respect for the integrity of European states are fundamental issues. The Polish leader also said he hoped to balance support for Denmark with maintaining strong transatlantic ties. Further talking on this, Tusk said the aim of the Paris meeting was to strengthen and unify European and American positions on Ukraine. Telling The Atlantic magazine on Sunday, Trump has reiterated that he wanted to take over Greenland and that the US needs the Danish territory for defense. Let's listen in to the Polish Prime Minister.
Nie należy spodziewać się w Paryżu decyzji tych ostatecznych. Niewykluczone, że do podpisania dokumentów, które zatwierdzą ostatecznie wspólne amerykańsko-europejskie stanowisko, dojdzie w najbliższych dniach, być może w Waszyngtonie. Tu kwestia jeszcze jest otwarta. Nie ulega wątpliwości, że tematem nieprzewidzianym przez nas i nieplanowanym będzie też kwestia Grenlandii. Ona wzbudziła bardzo dużo emocji w całej Europie i no, dla Polski dwie rzeczy są jasne i bardzo trudne do pogodzenia, nie oszukujmy się, ale są w sposób oczywisty, jasne i jednoznaczne. Żaden członek Paktu Północnoatlantyckiego nie powinien atakować czy grozić drugiemu członkowi Paktu Północnoatlantyckiego. Inaczej NATO traciłoby sens, gdyby w obrębie tego paktu dochodziło do konfliktu czy wzajemnych agresywnych kroków. Bardzo nam zależy na tym, aby wszystkie ewentualne spory czy dyskusje były rozwiązywane oczywiście w jakimś przyjaznym dialogu między członkami NATO. Solidarność europejska i poszanowanie integralności państw europejskich, no to są takie elementarne kwestie, więc oczywiście Dania może liczyć tutaj na solidarność całej Europy. Nie mam co do tego żadnych wątpliwości. Ale równocześnie tutaj Polska jest jednym z najlepszych przykładów. Trzeba robić wszystko, aby więzi europejsko-amerykańskie, te więzi transatlantyckie, one są przecież fundamentem NATO i fundamentem naszego bezpieczeństwa, nie ucierpiały w tych najbliższych dniach i miesiącach wskutek takich czy innych zapowiedzi, decyzji czy nieporozumień. Trudne zadanie, będzie wymagało dobrej woli ze wszystkich stron, ale chciałbym, żeby w Waszyngtonie było dla wszystkich jasne, że jakiekolwiek próby rozbicia czy podważania istoty NATO, Paktu Północnoatlantyckiego nie spotkają się z akceptacją chyba w żadnym kraju europejskim. Taką mam.
Donald Tusk there, the Prime Minister of Poland, another NATO state. Of course, the Danish leader, Mette Frederiksen, has said that NATO would be over if one of its members invaded another. Keith, do you believe that to be true? Can NATO survive an annexation of Greenland if it does indeed happen?
Absolutely not. That's the end of NATO. It's the end of the international order. I can't see how it's possible for them to allow sovereign territory, part of another country, to be used in this way. But there seems to be nobody who is explaining to the President of the United States he does not have the power to do this. And of course, if you look at the map of Greenland, which I did very recently, Canada is closer to Greenland, more relevant to its security than the United States. So I'm sure they'll have something to say about this. You simply cannot go around invading other countries. And as far as the EU is concerned, and NATO, I mean, what is Mark Rutte doing? He's the one who was full of praise for Donald Trump. What is he doing? I mean, you know, this is insane, trying to invade another country that's an ally. Invading any country is, in my view, very strange. But going to your own ally, your own backyard, and saying, I'm going to invade you, what's the point of keeping the organization alive?
Indeed. Keith, Vaz, as always, it's a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much for joining us and taking the time on NewsX World. We now move on over to the Middle East, and the United Arab Emirates withdrew its troops from Yemen's Socotra island last week, leaving roughly 600 tourists stranded as flights came to a halt. The move comes amid a deepening rift between the UAE and Saudi Arabia, who now back opposing factions in Yemen's civil war. Socotra, known for its unique flora and pristine beaches, had been under effective UAE control since 2018 through the Southern Transitional Council. UAE investment had turned the once quiet island into a niche tourist destination, including airport renovations and infrastructure projects. Now, control of the airport has shifted, and Yemeni airlines plan a flight to Jeddah on January the 7th. Experts, however, warn that influence over the island's air access translates into broader security and commercial control, highlighting its strategic importance in the Bab al-Mandab shipping corridor. Let's listen in to what some stranded tourists had to say.
Socotra is a fantastic place, amazing island with extremely beautiful sights, different landscapes. We spent an amazing week, and also we've been treated very well. People are very friendly and welcoming, very good food. If it is a delay of 1 day, 2 days, you can accept it. But now it's becoming a problem for all of us because we must go back to work, and it will cause a lot of problems to all of us because we have activities, we have jobs that we cannot go back to.
Purtroppo siamo incappati in questa situazione di problema geopolitico in atto che ci vede costretti ormai da parecchi giorni. Il problema qual è? Il problema è che siamo in tanti, siamo tantissimi, circa 600 persone provenienti da tutto il mondo, e questo causa ad ognuno di noi problemi lavorativi, problemi di ricongiungimento familiari e nel mio caso un problema sanitario, perché io tra pochi giorni dovrei fare un farmaco salvavita che non è facilmente reperibile, e quindi la mia preoccupazione è quella di riuscire a rientrare in Italia al più presto possibile, perché altrimenti potrebbe diventare un problema grave. E quindi chiedo alle autorità che intervengano e che sblocchino la situazione al più presto e per farci ritornare nei nostri paesi in sicurezza e tempestivamente.
An update there from the developing situation coming out of Yemen. However, Saul Sadka joins us now. He's a political commentator and he's joining us live from Tel Aviv. Saul, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, the fighting does indeed rage on the mainland, however. And how deep is the Saudi-UAE split in Yemen right now? Do you see this moving on any further than it already has? My apologies, Saul, I think you might be muted.
Sorry. My assumption is that when the UAE pulled out of its Yemeni activities, including from that island where those Italian tourists seem to be unfortunately stranded temporarily, that was the end of the matter for the UAE. The UAE had been in a standoff with the Saudis, and they had backed down. They had paid a game of chicken, and the UAE pulled away, probably with the intervention of Trump and his people in that regard. My guess is we won't find out the details of exactly what happened for a while, because these are both essentially dictatorships to one degree or another, and therefore it's not as open as in a democracy where these kind of discussions and negotiations would be immediately leaked and open to the press. Because of the closed nature of both those societies, and as well as the closed nature of Yemen and its various factions, everything is rather under the radar. So it's entirely unclear what will happen, although it is nice to hear that Italians do actually have to go back to work. That's not how I remember things being in the old days.
Right. Does the UAE's withdrawal actually mean loss of influence here from Abu Dhabi?
It might do, but at the same time, it might be we're just seeing one side of some wider deal that might include other activities in the Horn of Africa across the Bab el-Mandeb. It could be that what will happen today in Somaliland, the rumors are that Somaliland is about to receive the recognition of a number of nations, including the UAE. That's a rumor, we'll find out later, but it seems likely. It could be this is all part of some great game that's happening in the region to divide up the territories in the spheres of influence of the local powers, specifically Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the UAE. That's my guess of what's happening. So we're only currently seeing the bit that looks bad for the UAE, but we will in the next couple of days or weeks see how the quo in this quid pro quo is playing out.
Saul Sadka, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you very much for taking the time and joining us. We now move on, and China's top legislator has met with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung in Beijing today, expressing hopes for stable ties and a deeper cooperation between the two countries. Zhao Lezhu, China's third-ranking official, has told Lee that China seeks to consolidate good neighbourly friendship with South Korea. Moreover, Lee has also met Chinese Premier Li Qiang today, calling improving bilateral relations as an irreversible trend of the times. Lee Jae-myung is the first South Korean leader to visit the Chinese capital in the last 6 years. And experts say he aims to improve relations after a prolonged diplomatic standoff. The Korean leader also met with Chinese President Xi Jinping yesterday, where both leaders emphasized the importance of peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. They also discussed about the resumption of dialogue with North Korea. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.